Chris, my video. Okay. Okay, great. All right. All right. Good day, everyone. Welcome to our second webinar in this series here at the Island Policy Lab at the Biden School of Public Policy at the University of Delaware. I am Kalim Shah, Assistant Professor of Energy and Environmental Policy here, and the Director of the Island Policy Lab. So welcome to one and all. I think it may be morning in some places and late at night in others. But thank you for being here. A short word about the Island Policy Lab and the work that we do. We're a fairly new outfit here at the Biden School. We've been launched as a vehicle and a focal point to bring the scientific and research and empirical knowledge, data, and information to the service of the specific context and the policy needs of island jurisdictions. Islands, as we know, have very specific boundaries, limitations, but also opportunities and very interesting characteristics that have to be dealt with in specific ways. And as we know, islands are on the front lines of significant threats to their existence, including climate change, often heavily indebted. And of course, we know, as in today's discussions, that are driven by the global pandemic that is threatening the entire world, all countries. But with specific reference to islands, while some of the brunt has perhaps passed over many of our islands, perhaps because of reasons of isolation, geographic isolation, and so on. But really, a lot of the significant downstream effects are really bringing many of our island economies to the brink, right, to the edge. Significant factors, including the reduction in international travel, for example, has devastating effects on many of our islands, trade and tourism, hotels, hospitality, and so on which our island economies depend. Now, today we will be speaking about one particular building block of sustainable development that I think is really important to understand when we talk about sustainability and moving beyond and sort of resuscitating in this pandemic condition. So sustainable energy policy is important in islands because most of our islands are heavily dependent and sometimes solely dependent on imported fossil fuels. This has led to significantly high electricity tariffs and leaves island jurisdictions to the vulnerabilities and the vagaries of the global energy prices. In many of our islands, still questions of reliable energy access remain, and without energy access, there is exacerbation of the socioeconomic gaps between the haves and the have-nots. Still, a couple of our islands, actually our small island developing state regions, do have hydrocarbon resources, and the challenge for them there is to avoid the resource curse and not degrade their natural environments in this hydrocarbon usage or exploitation approach, and build green and clean economies. In energy policy, as we deal with here in our department, there are several regulatory and institutional barriers still in the way that we operate our energy sectors in several of our islands. There's financial and non-financial barriers to to competition, barriers that hinder investment. Some of this is changing, but quite slowly. So there's a lot of work to be done in those regards. And as I said, energy underpins all of the economic drivers that we have, be it agriculture, transportation, tourism. So energy usage, where we get our energy from, how we utilize our indigenous natural resources of solar potential, wind, geothermal in many cases, tidal power, how we transition to those forms of energy become really pivotal issues. Not to mention the challenge of doing these things and critical energy infrastructure in the situation of climate change impacts. And as we know, we experience extreme weather conditions, more erratic weather conditions now, hurricanes, tropical storms, flooding, drought, and so on, that can really set our economies back. Indebtedness, as I also mentioned, continues to be that underlying problem. In 2019, an estimate of the indebtedness of the Small Island Developing States Group was estimated at something like 50 trillion US dollars. So as you begin to overlay the indebtedness, the fossil fuel dependency, the COVID-19 pandemic situation, things become, less of a sunny picture, all right? But on the upside, we do have some momentum on moving forward with renewable sources and renewable technologies. And the questions now become scaling up and deepening, and that the questions of the energy transition and how fast and how effectively we can do that with our partners internationally, the agencies, donors, and other countries that are willing to help, and build our own island indigenous capacities to make this transition a reality. Of course, tying this back to our sustainable development goals. So to kick off today, I want to introduce our keynote speaker, who has actually been for quite some time on the front lines and a real champion of promoting sustainability and sustainable development in small island developing states. Later on, we will also hear from several of our colleagues who work in the US Associated Territories and do research there. We'll hear from the Pacific region, and we'll hear from the technology point of view as well. But our keynote today is Mr. Sai Navoti. He is the chief of the the SIDS unit, the Small Island Developing States unit at the United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA. So Mr. Navoti's unit monitors and reports on the implementation of the Samoa Pathway and the Sustainable Development Goals in SIDS countries. His unit also facilitates intergovernmental negotiations on key international agreements, including on climate change, trade, and a number of other matters. Prior to this post, Sai has served as the lead negotiator for the G77 plus China. He has been the lead climate negotiator for the Alliance of Small Island States, AOSIS. In his home country, Fiji, he's also served as a military officer, he served as a government lawyer, and he served as a diplomat. He holds several other high-level positions, including right now he's held the senior legal advisor position for the International Seabed Authority, and several other international appointments, too long to mention. So Mr. Navoti, he holds a bachelor's in politics. He holds degrees, he holds master's degrees and a law degree and 2 postgraduate diplomas in these areas. So let me hand you over to our keynote speaker today, Mr. Navoti.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shah. I trust that colleagues are hearing me okay. Let me then acknowledge the presence of our distinguished speakers this morning. And of course, good morning to you, Kalim, distinguished panelists, friends of small island developing states, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin, first of all, by thanking you, Kalim, and the University of Delaware for this kind invitation and for organizing this series of important events and focusing it on small island developing states. And thank you for the kind words of introduction. It is indeed an honor for me and a pleasure to be presenting these remarks on behalf of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Dr. Shah, incidentally, I'm just sitting here pondering that you have laid very well in your introductory remarks most of the things that I would have said in this in the remark that I'm going to make. Now, my focus of intervention this morning is twofold. First, I will briefly describe, as you have already alluded to, the unique characteristics and evolving challenges of energy needs in small island developing states and the effect of this present COVID pandemic. And secondly, I will underline the strategic and potential role of academia in support of small island developing states in developing of innovative solutions for energy transformation. Now, let me then begin by just following on from what you have laid out. There is a long standing international consensus that dates back to the early 90s. The latest was last year in the politically agreed declaration of the Small Island Developing States Accelerated Modality of Actions Midterm Review Outcome Document, or the Samoa Pathway Outcome Document, acknowledging that small island developing states remain a special case for sustainable development in view of their unique and vulnerable and particular vulnerabilities. As you have said, Kalim, small island developing states share specific common development challenges. For those who are familiar with small islands are fully conversant of this, but for the benefit of those who perhaps are coming for the first time, these challenges, as you had listed, include their small sizes, their narrow resource-based economies, geographical and economic isolation, their dependence on trade and travel, high cost of transport, communication and energy, extreme vulnerability to climate change and natural hazards, the fragility of their island ecosystems, and of course, their lack of access to consensual and financing. In a nutshell, due to their specific vulnerabilities, small island developing states are in the front line of multiple climate and nature crises, which are now being amplified by the present COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent economic fallout. The social and economic effect of the shutdowns of the global economy is hitting small island developing states disproportionately through diverse channels, through their health system, tourism revenues, remittance flow, food security, commodities, trade, as well as existing debt situation. According to recent analysis, there are indications that small island developing states will face much bigger challenges compared to the 2007 and 2008 global financial crisis. Now, with regard to the energy sector, the International Energy Agency indicates that the global demand has been declining by 6% due to the pandemic, while oil, natural gas, and coal have experienced strong declines due to the lockdown measures and weak aviation. It is interesting to note that renewable energy has been relatively more resilient to the COVID-19 shock. This is particularly important when considering the energy questions in small island developing states, where the importance of access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy is a recurrent issue. Indeed, SIDS relying on fossil fuels and import makes them extremely vulnerable to high transportation costs and fluctuating global prices. This explains why in most small island developing states, they have the most highest electricity tariff in the world, with direct consequences in terms of higher cost of living and of higher economic activities. Mr. Facilitator, most small island developing states have pursued investment in renewable energy technology in recent years in response to the oil price volatility. In doing so, almost all have established ambitious renewable energy targets. However, establishing ambitious targets has not changed their situation much. A number of challenges has been identified, you've alluded to some of them, which can be broadly categorized as financial and institutional. It has been generally difficult to attract private sector investments in renewable energy technologies to small island developing states due first to the small scale nature of their operations and the absence of economy of scale, thus limiting financial return available to potential investors. The second is that most private sector investments come from overseas. Difficulty in attracting private sector investments, coupled with constraining government spending, have meant that the vast bulk of investments in renewable energy technologies in small island developing states has been funded by development partners. Now, the use of development assistance to fund renewable energy investments has often raised questions of whether this is an appropriate use of aid funds. The second challenge is institutional. Now, the prevailing model of most electricity supply in small island developing states is that of a vertically integrated monopoly utility, owned mostly by governments. Electricity is often provided by a single state-owned enterprise, where monopoly is legislated, making it illegal for alternative providers to supply electricity. Some have advanced the argument that the key to addressing institutional challenges is strong regulations that is independent of government. While this has led to some improvements, it does not address constraint to investment associated with an absence of economy of scale and the general investment environment. Now, the cost for establishing independent regulatory bodies in small countries is generally quite high relative to the potential benefits of such arrangement, given the fixed cost associated with regulations. In summary, the development of renewable energy markets in SIDS have largely been constrained by a range of barriers, such as weak policy and regulation systems, lack of physical and non-physical incentives, financial constraints, limited access to modern technologies, lack of specialized training and limited human and institutional capacity, inadequate infrastructure, research and development, and innovation network. These barriers, now amplified by the COVID-19, continue to limit the exploitation of renewable energy resources, the development of a clean energy transition, and the promotion of a true energy economy and blue growth in small island developing states. These challenges and the unique SIDS realities leads me towards my second point regarding the possible way forward and the role of the research community in energy transformation as an accelerator of sustainable development and blue growth in small island developing states. Dr. Shah, the Samoa Pathway strongly supported the development of strategies and targeted measures to promote energy efficiency to foster sustainable energy system based on all energy sources, in particular renewable energy sources such as wind, sustainable biomass, solar, hydroelectric, biofuels, and geothermal energy. Now, that is why academic institutions and research centers like those in the SEEDS University Consortium, University of Delaware included, have a key role to play to unlock the sustainable energy potential of small island developing states, and at the same time help shape national and regional blue economy trajectories, particularly in a post-COVID era. Evidence-based support to states government to prioritize clean energy in their economic recovery plans will be key. According to the International Energy Agency, a well-informed policies and targeted investments can raise energy security, energy access, and affordability, while also boost economic growth, productivity, and competitiveness. This will imply research community involvement throughout the energy transition process, from market and policy framework to technology alternatives and capacity building. Partnership between universities, public-private sector for technology transfer, and targeted technical advisory services to develop ocean-based renewable energy policies, technologies, and innovative ocean financing instruments can be a game changer. Innovative financial mechanisms such as blue bonds, connecting private sector investors to project designs to support sustainable energy or blue economy incentives are an example. Moreover, in small island developing states, the energy, climate, nature nexus should be at the heart of integrating approaches to policy development across all relevant sectors. On one hand, seeds are custodians of the world's ocean, which plays a key role in climate action via nature-based solutions. On the other, the transformation of for seeds national energy sectors will also be a driver to unlock the blue economy potential with a generation of financial resources to protect the ocean and further promote adaptation to climate change. In that context, interdisciplinary research, innovation, and development are more needed than ever to fully comprehend the interplay between energy, climate, nature in an integrated manner. Dear colleagues, I will conclude by saying that both small island developing states and the research community at large share a common central characteristics. Both are pioneers. The unique vulnerabilities and challenges of small island developing states put them and their determination at the forefront to implement the most effective adaptation and sustainable development solutions. The fast-changing world and the multiple crises we are experiencing put also the research institutions and universities and other entities like this at the forefront to guide us through to new frontiers, innovation, and risk-informed development pattern. At a time when problems become more and more complex, exacerbated by multiple crises, I firmly believe that a win-win university, government, private sector cooperation scheme can meaningfully support small island developing states in unlocking their energy transition and blue growth potential, letting our present situation be a true turning point for people and planet. Dr. Shah, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Navoti. We appreciate your taking time to address and detail the current situation and some of the initiatives that are being undertaken and the challenges that lie ahead very concisely. I want to particularly note your reference to the University of Delaware's role and actually new coordination role in the quest for leveraging research, technology, innovation, interdisciplinary approaches to these challenges, and the role that we will be playing in the existing universities consortium of small island states. And I want to publicly acknowledge that it is through your support and the support of your unit that we are now here at the Island Policy Lab at the Biden School, leading and coordinating the rejuvenation of this very important multi-stakeholder partnership called the Universities Consortium of Small Island States to support the objectives of the Samoa project, the Samoa Pathway, and the Sustainable Development Goals as much as we can. And right now, this is a consortium of about a dozen island-based universities and research institutions, and we are growing this network and building the capacity of our island-based researchers and research institutions in support of not just sustainable energy, but as Mr. Navoti lays out, all of the related challenges that our islands face in the quest for sustainable development. So thank you very much for that. Now we will move forward to our next speaker, our first panelist, Ms. Arieta Rakai. We're very pleased to have Ms. Rakai here with us today. She is the program officer in charge of the, if I must say, very successful and progressive SIDS Lighthouse Initiative. I myself have worked on some of the components of this in the Caribbean in the past. And she represents IRENA. Just a little bit about Ms. Rakai. She is a program officer and leads the SIDS Lighthouse Initiative at the IRENA International Renewable Energy Agency based out of Abu Dhabi. She has more than 18 years of experience in policy, engineering, project and program implementation in renewable energy and energy efficiency globally, in her native Fiji, in the Pacific region, and in small island states in general. Her background is in electrical and electronics engineering, and she also has a master's in renewable energy from Murdoch University. So with that, I'll hand you over to Ms. Rakai.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shah, for the very kind introduction. I also want to thank you, Mr. Navoti, for setting the scene for us and articulating very clearly the challenges associated with energy transformation in small island developing states. I acknowledge my fellow speakers from SIDS and from the university, and a very good evening to you, speaker listeners that are listening to us this evening. I will start off by just giving you an overview of our agency, an intergovernmental agency that was just formed recently in 2011. We currently have about 161 members, with a few joining this year. And our headquarters is here in Abu Dhabi. We have our offices also in Germany, in the US. And our mandate is to promote the widespread and the adoption of renewables and all forms of renewables, bioenergy, geothermal, hydro, ocean, solar, and wind. Out of the 162 member countries now, I think more than 40 are from the small island developing states. As we talk about energy transformation here in IRENA, we have some objectives, the principles that are the foundation of how we are supporting our member countries. We look at ambition, what our members have in their policies. We try and support them in the implementation of their plans, in their NDCs, in meeting their SDGs. We ensure that there's public intervention. We try to actively support public policy and mobilizing investments and encouraging private sector engagement in the energy sector. Investment is a known issue in small island developing states. Green jobs is something that we are also looking at, supporting the expansion of the workforce. Not only creating jobs, but look at the socio-economic benefits as well, the gender issues, etc. I've alluded to industry. Seeds are small, and there are opportunities though that local industries, whether it's focused on energy transformation or otherwise, that can be created when there is energy transformation in small island developing states. And of course, supporting the overall SDG 7 energy access, but ensuring that we also address the nexus, whether it's water, health, food security, and now that we are moving into this, this new world of ICT, of virtual platforms. So we are also looking at ICT. As for the small island developing states, how is IRENA responding to this? So when the leaders called for action under the Samoa pathway Mr. Navoti alluded to, the Seeds Lighthouses Initiative was established. It was launched in 2014 with small island developing states and a few partners, but to date there are 36 seeds and 30 partners that we work together to support our seeds, not only those that are members of IRENA, but also the territories that can join the partnership initiative in their energy transformation. One of the overall aim of the partnership initiative is to move away from doing things in isolation and taking a holistic approach, whether it's capacity building, technology, it's markets, or even financing. So as I mentioned before, it was launched in 2014, and there were some initial targets of about $500 million mobilized for renewable energy. We had targets for installed capacity on solar and wind, and this was met 3 years in advance in 2017. So what we did, we convened our partners on the sides of the General Assembly, the Climate Summit, and we had consultations on where are we going to move to now that we have met our target. So on the screen before you are the new targets that the member countries, seeds, came up with, that we move away from the power sector, but we look at everything else that affects energy. As we know, energy is the backbone of every economy, especially for small island developing states. So if I can just highlight a few, coupled with the challenges to climate change that seeds is always faced with, and with the health issues due to COVID, the challenge that we are currently facing, we're looking at supporting countries now in their NDCs. We are looking at, from the starting, identifying the projects to actual implementation into the sustainability of the projects. And we also want to ensure that anything that we do influences the policy makers, the decision makers. So whether it's transport sector, whether it's industry, whether it's about women empowerment, energy efficiency, or even data and information, which is quite a huge challenge in seeds. We noticed this when we are looking at the NDC targets, when we are reviewing their national energy targets, that there is a huge challenge in collecting data. And not only collecting, but having reliable data that can be the basis of analysis that policymakers can use for their decision making. And lastly, we also set a target for installed capacity for the next 5 years. So it was set in 2018. We put now a target of 5 gigawatts installed capacity by 2023. As we stand now, we are at about 3.45 gigawatts installed capacity. So we are on track to meeting our target. There might be some issues with this year, what we're experiencing this year, but we as a small island developing states, we know that there are lots of challenges, but they are also resilient. The fight continues, and they continue to move forward with the uptake of renewable energy. As you see on the graph, there's a lot of uptake of solar, and there is a lot of uptake of bioenergy and wind capacity. I just wanted to highlight why there was a lot of uptake of solar and wind. It's really due to the costs that's been falling drastically over the last few years. And our analysis show that the prices will continue to fall for the next 3 to 5 years. I note that IEA also released a report recently that confirms this as well. And it's also good to note that cost reductions for solar and wind are due to the improved technology. It's widely used in small island developing states. It's adaptable now. There are designs that can withstand cyclones. They raise up some of the designs so that they're not damaged by floods. The economies of scale continue to increase, of course, and there are competitive supply chains. And I must say that there are a lot of this now in small island developing states, especially for solar. And of course, the wide experience that we have been witnessing right around the globe. For more information on costs, I've highlighted there our publication. You can get more information on the costs. We also host a knowledge sharing platform. It comes in the form of our website. So here you can see the few projects that we have done on the ground. One is featured right there, the Waste to Energy project. I think it's 2 megawatt in Maldives. It's funded under the IRENA ADMD facility. We have country and regional energy profiles, the publications, not only from IRENA, but from all the partners. It's their roadmaps, it's their policies, it's their long-term plans, NDCs, so on and so forth. So feel free to visit our knowledge sharing platform to get more information about what Seeds Lighthouse's initiative is doing to support seeds in their energy transformation. In terms of technical support and advisory services, I just want to give you a bit of a snapshot in response to the challenges that was highlighted in setting the scene by the two gentlemen. We are supporting a lot of small island developing states in their NDC enhancement and implementation. We are working now towards the next COP, and seeds, in spite of the COVID challenge, they are not slowing down. They're ramping up their commitment to enhance their NDC and also develop their long-term strategy, their investment plans, and also to implement this. We are currently supporting about 14 small island developing states in all three regions. We also we undertake renewable readiness assessment, very holistic, high-level assessment on policies, on the different things that are already on the ground that support energy transformation, and then we identify gaps where we can come in, or we tell our partners that these certain seeds need this help. If you can help them with making or developing bankable projects, or whether it's on regulatory framework, power purchase agreements, or whether it is on target setting, so on and so forth. We also undertake grid integration analysis, ensuring that there is stability when we bring on different types of renewable energy resources onto the grid, knowing they are very intermittent. Without storage, it can really affect the grid stability, and knowing that we are dealing with the over 30 years old grid in islands. I think this is a very important issue that we are looking at, but we also note that there are also partners that are undertaking and supporting seeds in grid integration. We help countries in developing their roadmap, giving them the vision, a roadmap to where they will get to in 2030, 2050, very much in line with their NDCs, and we're trying to streamline it with their national policies as well. And of course, one of our very important mandates, we try to strengthen capacity, whether it's institutional or otherwise, different issues that relate to energy transformation. So there's a snapshot of what we have undertaken to date and what we continue to do. There is more that I couldn't highlight everything else. Now it's just moved virtually. So we are looking forward again to the time that we will be in the islands with the face-to-face training workshops, certification, entrepreneurship programs, and so on and so forth. I wanted to highlight a bit of work on the national determined contributions, the seeds commitment under the Paris Agreement. You will note that there were so many seeds that we were working with. We noted in our analysis in the last submission that of the 34 small island developing states that submitted their NDCs, 33 had renewable energies and 29 had quantifiable renewable energy targets. So it is very imperative for us to work with them to see that it's not only on paper. How do we get the investments? How do we strengthen capacity? And how do we actually realize it, achieve this, have things on the ground, whether it's grid connected, mini grids, or standalone systems. We also have a few project facilitation tools that we assist the small island developing states with. Resource assessment is one. It's for solar and wind. It ranges from rooftop solar simulation. We have a pre-feasibility study where we not only look at the technical viability, we look at the financial and the environmental viability as well. We have the project Navigator that assists countries in ensuring that the concept notes or proposals are bankable. There are different layouts for GCF, for other financing institutions. So it's all there. And sometimes we organize regional capacity building efforts where we bring seats together and partners to develop more bankable projects on renewable energy. And of course, we have a funding mechanism where we actually fund projects. You have seen the Port of Maldives. We are supporting a project in the Solomon Islands. It's a hydro project. Antigua and Barbuda, grid connected solar. And in Cuba, it's a 15 megawatt grid connected solar PV. And we have another joint initiative with Terawatt, which is open solar contracts, where we have designed all the different templates that you will need. There are times that you just don't know how to put technical information together for tender, for agreements, PPAs when you're talking with independent power producers, for operation maintenance, sustainability of the projects. So we developed all these contracts, all these templates, all these agreements, and you can find it on this website. You have a snapshot on the screen. We also support our partners and our members in accessing finance and developing bankable projects. So we have just recently launched together with UNDP, SE for All and GCF, this climate investment platform. It's like an online marketplace where all the different stakeholders come together and match the projects, the funding, whether it's you need an engineering, someone to evaluate the engineering aspect of your project, or whether it's EIA, environmental aspect. And we also provide capacity building and knowledge disseminations through this platform. The platform is operationalized through investment forums. Unfortunately, it had to be delayed. So we're going to be kicking it off, hopefully in person in the Caribbean and in the Pacific next year. I will end there. I think that's it from me. The contact details are on the screen, but if there are any other questions relating to my presentation or about Irina's work or the Seeds Lighthouses initiative, I'll be happy to take them. Thank you so much, Dr. Kalim, back to you.
Thank you so much, Arieta. Very informative, and thank you for the links that we can go to for more detailed information. What I would like to do in the interest of time is we have now we have a number of questions coming into the chat for Arieta and also for Sai. But let me pose one. I'm summarizing one question to Sai at this point, and then once all the panelists have spoken at the end, we will circle back to some of the questions that we have in the chat for all of the panelists. But to Sai, if you can take a minute to perhaps give us some insight on one of the questions we have. How is your office or other related UN agencies working with donors and the private sector, as Arieta has also mentioned, to increase energy security and energy transition? Perhaps if in islands, perhaps if there's one or two very key examples of projects or ways that you're working that you think can work if we scale up, that could be best practices, or if you can cite some of the success stories maybe in how your office is working with these stakeholders.
Yes, indeed, Dr. Shah, thank you very much for this question. It's a loaded one, but let me begin by making it clear to our colleagues that the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, unlike ATA's organization, IRENA, we operate at the global level. Now, we are the secretariat of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, where all stakeholders, member states, and all other entities around the world can do their part to leave no one behind. Now, we assist countries make informed decisions by providing them information through our publication, our databases, and through our support for international deliberations. That includes in the United Nations General Assembly, in the Economic and Social Council, in the various commissions and forums and other bodies of the United Nations. Let me just make reference to the report that was published this year, the 2020 report on the SDGs. Now, that has been published, and you can find it at the website of UNDESA. Now, specifically on SDG 7, which deals with energy, it's interesting to find what the report said, that the proportion of the global population with access to electricity increased from 83% in 2010 to 90% in 2018. Meaning that over 1 billion people have acquired this essential service. Now, our report also found that slow progress to clean cooking solutions is putting the health of nearly 3 billion people at risk. Now, stepped up effort of renewable energy are needed to achieve long-term climate goals. These are some of the findings of the reports that we published. UNDESA also do capacity development projects and priorities, and it is very much guided by its mandate, of course. And our priority countries are the least developed countries, small island developing states, and of course, countries emerging from conflicts around the world. Let me just highlight that next year, 2021, the department will be facilitating the high-level dialogue on energy, now to be held under the auspices of the United Nations General Assembly. Now, this convened as the first global gathering on energy since the UN Conference on New and Renewable Energy Sources in 1981. So this is a big gathering of people, and I'm sure some of our listeners who are watching in this morning will be interested to find out more about this global conference. Now, as for us, we are of course in charge of partnerships, and we do register partnerships under the SEEDS partnership framework, and we are very much welcoming all stakeholders who want to partner with small island developing states, including in the field of energy, to please register your projects under the SEEDS partnership framework. Right now, we are noticing that there is a good effort on the wave energy converter. We have interest in that, and we are supporting efforts by the private sector to enter into partnerships with the government of SIDS to explore these other sources of energy source. So that is very briefly what UNDESA is doing. Let me clarify, we are not an agency like IRENA or the United Nations Development Program, who have offices in the ground in small island developing states actually doing work. We are at the global level providing policy guidance and setting international norms, including in this very important sector, energy. Thank you, Dr. Shah.
Thank you so much, Sai. So let's continue with our technical panel, and we will respond to the many questions coming in a little bit later on. So next, I'd like to present Mr. Professor Stephen Hegedus, our very own Professor Hegedus, from the University of Delaware, where he's been for the last 35 years, primarily working on solar photovoltaic research. He is also he's Professor of Electrical Engineering and Senior Scientist at our Institute for Energy Conversion. His research has been funded by the US Department of Energy and the photovoltaic industry. His current work is exploring the application of microgrids and smart inverters to increase solar grid integration. He has published over 120 papers, has mentored many students, graduate students, and he is a co-editor of the very well-known handbook of photovoltaic science and engineering. I think most important for me to mention about Stephen is that he practices what he preaches. He is the first resident of Newark, Delaware, to install a rooftop PV system. So, you know, he does what he says, right? Now, he will be presenting today his research that is done with one of our star doctoral students here at UDEL, Mr. Sergio Sepulveda, a fourth-year PhD student in electrical engineering here. So I'll hand it over to Sergio and Stephen.
So that you've seen my title slide there. We'll be talking about microgrids in general and giving you an overview of what they can do, why they are a perfect solution for a lot of the problems that have been brought up by the previous speakers. And then we'll talk about a very specific case of analyzing the cost and design of a microgrid for a specific island, St. Vincent. I'll just mention that the Institute of Energy Conversion is the world's oldest solar energy laboratory. So we'll talk today about the motivation for microgrids, definition of a microgrid, in case you're not familiar with it, some basics, operating principles, and then get into a very specific case. So islands generally have some similarities in terms of their electrical infrastructure. They're highly dependent on imported fossil fuels, in many cases 100%, and that's often diesel. They have an aging, antiquated transmission and distribution system, as was mentioned previously. They're very vulnerable to storms, especially in the Caribbean, and price fluctuation of fuels. And being an island, they have to provide all the power that they need all the time. They can't borrow or connect to an adjacent grid provider. So some of the ways to address these problems are with renewable energy-based microgrids. And some of the reasons why this is works so well is that islands often have very abundant renewable resources, solar, photovoltaics, and wind. They could certainly benefit from a greener image and reduce their dependence on imported fuel and price fluctuations. by getting the bulk of their power from solar and wind. And by reconfiguring your grid as a series of microgrids, you increase the resilience in case there is a natural disaster. So the overall motivation is we know that there's an increasing frequency of hurricanes in particular, all kinds of storms. The grid is also vulnerable to cyber attacks. And we want to try to integrate a higher percentage of renewable energy onto our grids. And there are challenges with doing that without compensating and having some other aspects like storage. So the idea of a microgrid, which I'm showing here, is that you have a network which has multiple energy sources, could be photovoltaics, could be dispatchable fossil fuel like combined heat and power, natural gas, or fuel cells. You might have backup diesel generators. You definitely want to have storage. And then you have your load. And one of the things about a microgrid is that it can target the specific load. So there. You can match the supply of the microgrid to either an existing load, could be a municipality, a town, a factory, a resort, or to a new one that needs to be powered and wants to have its own reliable power. The advantages are that you have reliability and resilience built in because you can disconnect from the grid as you need, and you can integrate a higher percentage of renewables than you could if you were just trying to do this to the entire grid. And as we'll show, it's more cost effective. One of the things about microgrids is that the previous speakers said, typically grids on islands are highly monopolized and centralized. Microgrids are disruptive to that model because they're very decentralized and they're under the control of the owners or the users of that power. So I'm going to talk here about one of the reasons why hybrid microgrids are such a great idea. A hybrid is one where you combine two different sources of energy, at least two. And so, for example, if we go with renewables like solar photovoltaics and a diesel generator, as you can see here in this table, they have nearly opposite characteristics, or complementary, you might say. One depends on weather, but has excellent reliability in terms of long-term performance. One has no fuel costs, the other one has very high fuel costs. One can handle peak loads much better than the other. One has very low operating costs, namely solar, compared to the diesel, and one has no CO2 emissions and the other one has very high. So what this graph over here is showing is the total life cycle cost, let's say over 20, 30-year lifetime of a project, and the percentage of the energy that is supplied, let's say by diesel. So if you look at 0% diesel, 100% solar plus batteries, you have a very high initial cost, but you have very low operating costs. But over the life of the project, it's a relatively expensive proposition. As you start to, because you have to oversize the batteries, oversize the solar array to meet your demand for 3 cloudy days or for the grid going down, and you have to be totally independent. But as you start to add a little bit of dispatchable fossil fuel energy, you can reduce the size of your solar and your batteries, because when you have those couple cloudy days, you can, run your diesel generator. But as you start to go to higher and higher diesel fraction, your cost of fuel over the 20 or 30 years is escalating. And you start requiring more and more maintenance, because the diesel generators, as you're running them more and more, they're cycling more, they have more failures and need more maintenance. So when you look at the optimum, there tends to be a sweet spot of somewhere around 10 to 20% in many projects. It's found 10 to 20% fossil fuel, and therefore 80 or 90% renewables. The way in which one way you could do this is showing the load profile. So this would be over a day. So this is midnight, this is noon, and this is the end of the day. This is showing how you could meet the load. This is in kilowatts with different resources. So for example, in this case, they're running the generator at night. I wouldn't necessarily recommend meeting all your load with the generator, but during the day, during the evening hours, you meet the load with the generator, and the green is batteries. And then as soon as the sun comes up, let's say around 7 o'clock in the morning, you start providing some of your load with solar, and you reduce the amount and you start putting some in the batteries. This red curve here is the state of charge of the batteries. So you're filling up your batteries, and then at the end of the day, when people come home from work and they're turning on more electric appliances and they have fans and air conditioners on, you always see a peak load. Peak loads typically occur after the sun goes down in many locations. And so in this case, you're meeting that peak load with energy from the batteries that were filled with the renewable solar that was generated during the day. This reduces the fluctuations, or it sort of flattens the load curve, and it reduces the ramping and reduces the use of fossil fuels. And so it's an excellent way of meeting demand with this hybrid approach. And here's some examples. On the left is the island of Ta'au. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, in American Samoa. 2 years ago, they replaced their entire fossil fuel powered grid with an entirely solar plus battery grid. So because they have no more dispatchable fossil fuels, they had to oversize their battery. So they have 3 days of battery storage. And this saves them 100,000 gallons of diesel per year. On the island of Kauai, which is part of the state of Hawaii, they decided they wanted to reduce their peak demand, that evening peak that I showed you in the previous curve. So they added a 13 megawatt solar array with a 4-hour battery, so that at night they could meet all of their peak demand with clean solar electricity. And overall, even though they had to invest in this solar plus batteries, they reduced their overall electric costs by 10%. And finally, we all know that the island of Puerto Rico suffered massive disturbance and destruction of their electric grid with Hurricane Maria. They are rebuilding that grid as a network of microgrids. So they are going to have 3 classes of microgrids, smaller personal ones, primarily residential, larger community-based microgrids, which will be based on a cooperative governance model, and then more professional third-party microgrids where someone comes in, builds it, and sells the energy as a service to meet the load. So the load could be a food processing plant, a municipality, a small village, a resort. And by connecting them all, they can support each other and share power. But if the grid goes down, they can each operate independently and provide power largely with solar and batteries and backup generators to meet the load. And now my colleague Sergio is going to talk to you. He's going to take over and talk to you about some modeling and simulation work that he's done.
Let me just do it again. Hi everyone, just 1 second, I pull up my screen. Share screen number 1. Okay. Can you all see my screen? Can you please confirm? Okay. So hi again. What we wanted to show today is some modeling that we did on St. Vincent and the Grenadines island. This is also a small island developing state that it has several islands, but the biggest one is St. Vincent. And they have a very high potential in both PV and wind. PV has above the average in the world, 4.9 sun peak hours, and the wind average wind speed is almost 8 meters per second, which is very high for wind generation. And I want to point out, so this is the location of the island. It's in the Caribbean, north from Venezuela and very close to the Dominican Republic. And the electricity generation in 2016 was 82% fossil fuels, which is mostly coming from diesel generators. And they also have 17% from hydro and only 1% from solar. So what we want to show here is how can we use a large microgrid to provide the electric load demand of that island. This is the electric load profile that we retrieved from this journal paper. They have a peak load of 21 megawatts and the average load of 344 megawatt hour. This is the same data, but just rearranged from the highest to the lowest during the whole year. And then what I want to show here is that it is difficult to come up with the last 2 megawatts. The last peak is required only for a short period of time. So during 10% of the time, you need to provide these last 2 megawatts of electricity. So what we did is we used Homer Grid simulation software and to trying to provide electricity to that electric load. And we took into account PV, wind, a diesel generator, and lithium-ion batteries. We are not taking into account the utility, and we also neglected the transmission and distribution losses for simplification purposes. We're considering a 25-year project lifetime, and the diesel fuel price is $1 per liter with a 2% per year increase. Now, these are the results. We consider in 5 cases. We have the baseline, which I named case 0 with 100% diesel. And then we try different combinations of PV and wind, like only PV and only wind and somewhere in between. And we wanted to focus on a 50% distribution between PV and wind. So what we have here and what Professor Hegedus was discussing is that if we have diesel generator only, that means that you have a lower capital cost in year 0, but then you will have a very high operation and maintenance cost per year. So the total overall cost of the system will be about $500 million. Now, if we have a 50%, we can have, compared to the base case, 42% lower net present cost, which is around $300 million. We will have a payback period of only 5 years, and then excess electricity will be 5%. But also because we are incorporating a large amount of solar and wind, so we're gonna reduce, we're gonna avoid 77,000 tons of CO2 per year. And I know this number might be a little misleading. 50% PV and 50% wind doesn't mean that 100% of the load is met with renewable. And this 50% means that the PV is designed to produce that amount of power compared to the annual load. But as Professor Hegedus was saying, meeting all the load with renewable only is not cost effective. So we still have to meet about 11% of the load with diesel. And that's shown in this graph. We have the distribution per month of how much PV and wind is being used. And on average, during the whole year, 45% of the load is met by PV, 44% with wind, and we still need this 11% of fossil fuel, which is within the range that Steve was mentioning in the renewable energy and fossil fuel graph. Now, this is the cost summary. So we have, during the lifetime of the project, different kinds of costs. Operation and maintenance is mainly from diesel, the diesel generator. We have diesel fuel, and the capital cost, the larger amount is 12-hour lithium-ion battery, and then the PV. And the salvage cost is just the cost of the equipment that is at the end of the project you can resell. And this is showing in the cash flow year after year how the costs are breakdown. So we have at the beginning a large capital cost and then a much lower operation and maintenance cost. But at year 15, the batteries need to be replaced. At year 20, the wind turbines need to be replaced. And at year 25, we can get some value from the batteries and from the wind. And PV will last for the 25 years of the project. And finally, this energy dispatch graph is showing how the energy is met hour by hour. And what I want to point out here is this blue, light blue line represents the battery self-charge. So it's cycling between 100% and 20%. And you shouldn't go below 20% just to preserve the lifetime of the battery. And this purple line is the generator. So what I want to show here is that with this system, you can run the entire island for several days in a row, but there will be times where the battery self-charge is very low. You will have little or no solar and very low wind. So when you don't have sun, wind, and energy storage, you still need to turn on the generator for a few hours every few days. And to conclude, 4 key points. The first one is just to reinforce what Professor Hegedus was showing, that getting to 100% renewable is really not cost effective. From our results here, we needed 11% diesel and 89%. So in the sweet spot, not only in our results, but in other studies, is between 85 to 90% renewable and 10 to 15% fossil fuels. There is a high potential of wind and solar in most islands that need to be exploited. And the batteries can really help to balance the randomness of the renewables. And finally, the aging electric grid can be updated using a network of microgrids, and that we have all of the benefits that Professor Hegedus was mentioning before. And with that, I will turn it back to Kalim to see if you want to address any question now or later.
Thank you very much, Sergio and Stephen. So this is not, I wonder how it looks in some of the other islands as well, as we get this very interesting case study from St. Vincent. Quick clarification, Sergio. Is this just for the main island or is it also for the Grenadines? So
the log profile that we got from the paper, they mentioned it was the whole country. So it does include, for this modeling purposes, it does include the Grenadines as well.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Thank you so much. All right, so quickly moving to our next speaker. We have with us, it's our pleasure to have Dr. Ravita Prasad of the Fiji National University. She's been there since 2009 as a lecturer. More recently, she completed phenomenal PhD work on long-term energy planning in Fiji. I had the great pleasure to get to know Ravita through being on her external committee for this work. It's very excellent and very applied practical work that will have policy implications for the Fiji Islands. She did her PhD work at the University of South Pacific on long-term energy planning. Her focus was on reducing emissions and fossil fuel importation. She has already published several papers from that dissertation work. She was also a very core person in the team that developed Fiji's low emission development strategy 2018 to 2050, giving us some intimate knowledge and experience in how that policy and strategy development process works and the integration of her scientific research into the policy realm. So with that, I will give you over to Dr. Ravita Prasad.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Shah, for that introduction, and I would like to thank you for inviting me for this webinar. I hope you are able to see my screen.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay.
If you want
Right.
to, you can put it into presentation mode. Yeah, okay.
So my topic today is measures to reduce Fiji's fossil fuel import and its related emissions. I will be also talking about some of the university partnership with the government and the private sector, some of the projects. So to begin with, Fiji Islands, it's made out of around 330 islands, out of which 1/3 is inhabited with a population of 885,000, according to the 2017 census. The GDP that we have in 2018 was 10.7 billion Fijian dollars. And we have a power utility company, Energy Fiji Limited, sole utility here in Fiji, who is providing grid electricity to 4 islands in Fiji. As you can see on the screen on the left-hand side, the main island, the biggest island, Vitilevu, Vanuatu, then we have Ovalau, and Taveuni Island has recently come on grid in 2017. If we look at the 2017 census data, then according to that, 96% of the households in Fiji has got some form of access to electricity. From this 96%, 78% of the households are getting electricity from the grid. The rest are getting from microgrids and diesel generators and solar home systems. The generation capacity for Energy Fiji Limited is at December 2015. As we see from the table that Vitilevu has got the highest grid, the biggest grid with a peak demand of 170 megawatts. And that is supplied by both renewable and thermal-based generation. 130 megawatts of renewable capacity is there, and this renewable, mostly it's a hydro, and there is some percentage of wind. The thermal generators, 130 megawatts, there's a heavy fuel oil generator and industrial diesel oil. For Vanuatu, Ovalau, and Taveuni, these are smaller grids. And for Vanuatu, it's 7.4 megawatt peak demand. Available capacity renewable is 800 kilowatt of hydro. And we have the rest coming from diesel generator. Ovalau is 100% diesel. And Taveuni has got 700 kilowatt hydro and 2 megawatt diesel generators. Apart from EFLs, we have EFLs generation capacity. We have got 2 independent power producers in Fiji, Fiji Sugar Corporation and Tropic Woods. These 2 institutions are providing electricity, selling surplus electricity to EFL grid, and these are biomass-based generation. And also, recently, $5 million US dollars project has been approved for Ovalau. It's based on agro-photovoltaic system that would be meeting 100% of the energy demand for Ovalau. And also, we have got behind the meter grid solar PV connections, mostly on commercial premises. And if we look at the total additions that are there, this is around 4 megawatt of solar we have. And the peak demand, as I showed you earlier, it was 170 megawatts. So we still have got a lot more of solar PV that can be connected to the grid without any grid stability issues. Now that was the power sector side. Now, if we look at the transport side, Fiji's transport sector, land, maritime, and aviation, these are totally dependent on imported fossil fuels. And as we see from the pie chart shown, around 70% of the total fuel import is going into our transport side. So we have um, uh, um, ADO, and we have gasoline, and we have aviation turbine fuel. These are all for the transport sector, and we have LPG also, which is going into the transport side, and also in commercial and household sector that are using LPG. The HFO, heavy fuel oil, and industrial diesel oil, these are used in the electricity side, and this is just around 24% of the total fuel import. So we see that the electricity is consuming far less compared to our transport side. And if we look at the total import average from analyzing 2005 to 2017 data, 540 million liters of fuel is imported annually, with an average cost of 634 million Fijian dollars. This cost is taking up 10% on average, 10% of the Fiji's GDP. And also, if we look at the trend, the fuel import volume is increasing annually at 3% per annum, while the cost is increasing at 5% per annum. Now, in addition to the high cost of fuel import and our dependency on it, as other speakers have also mentioned, that we have got climate change challenges and COVID-19 pandemic. This has shown us more on what is the importance of the energy sector. It is in powering the health centers, powering the food and water production facilities, and powering the communications centers. And also, if we invest in renewable and energy efficiency projects, we would be creating jobs, which would be leading to a building of the economy. And for these things, we need evidence-based policies should be prepared. So for Fiji, the key planning documents that we have at the moment, the first one that I would be talking about is Fiji's Green Growth Framework. It was done up in 2014, and it has got 3 pillars: environmental, economic, and social. And from these 3 pillars, there were 10 thematic areas. And thematic areas 7 and 8 are talking about energy security and sustainable transportation. And then we have Fiji's nationally determined contributions implementation roadmap that was developed in 2017. It is telling us the pathways that Fiji need to take in order to meet our NDC targets, which is 30% reduction in business as usual emissions, and 10% is unconditional, and while the 20% is conditional based on the financing. Then also we have our national development plan, 5-year and 20-year. And in this document also, we are the vision is resource efficient, cost effective, and environmentally friendly energy sector. And then we have got the recent document in 2018, Fiji's LED's report, low emission development strategy till the mid-century. And here Fiji is showing different scenarios And in the very high ambitious scenario, we are saying that how can we go to net zero emissions by 2050? Apart from those documents, we have also got some other documents shown on the slide here. And all these are based, going to lead to work in the energy actions that we can take. Now, Fiji's existing policy, the adopted one is the 2006 National Energy Policy. In 2013, there was a draft energy policy drafted, but it wasn't adopted. So Department of Energy at the moment is working with UNESCO and GGGI to develop a SDG 7 roadmap, which would be looking at these documents that I have presented earlier on, to complement these documents and also to find solutions to the gaps that exist. And UNESCO is using their next step tool for developing the SDG 7 roadmap. The results from this roadmap would be used in the development of our new national energy policy. Now, coming to some of the university, government, private sector partnership, the projects that we have. I would just like to start with that we have got 3 universities in Fiji. The University of the South Pacific, it's a regional university, more than 50 years in operation. And we have got Fiji National University, 10 years now. And then we have got the University of Fiji, which was founded in 2004. So Fiji National University and University of Fiji have just recently come, but USP has been here for a long time. The first project that I want to talk about is the FNU project. This was commissioned in June 2020. Just this year, it's a 250 kilowatt grid connected solar PV, which is supplying power to one of our campuses in Nandi, in Vitilevu. And it has got both the rooftop mount and ground mount system. The ground mount system is for student learning purposes. And this system is meeting 80% of the demand for campus. If there's any surplus generated, it is exported to the EFL grid. Also, we have got some new buildings that are coming up in our capital projects. And these new buildings have got energy efficient systems that are there to reduce our demand. Also, we have in the mechanical engineering some very interesting projects going on. This is Dr. Delena's project on compact biogas project. It started in 2013, and it started small, using a single 1,000-liter digester to generate biogas for cooking, and it was for student learning as well. And now, then later on, she added 2 more digesters to it. But this year, she has purchased a bigger digester, and she has plans to liquefy the biogas that is produced and to use it in the generator for lighting purposes. That was the compact biogas project. Next, we have the sustainable maritime transport. We have got the project from, again, mechanical engineering, Master Chochi. He is very much into sail canoe design. And his project, he has designed and built with the local craftsmen sailboats that are run purely on the sail, so wind power. And the picture that is shown, this is one of the canoes that is now sitting in one of the museums in Germany, and two others are currently being used in Fiji. The next project that I want to show is the solar charging station. This was done by Dr. Raturi at USP, and it was funded by the French government in 2012. It was a student research project, and it is also used to demonstrate climate change mitigation strategies and to create awareness. This is the first solar charging station that we have in Fiji for demo purposes. And it's a very important one, because in our planning documents that we see for the transport side, we are planning to go electric. So we need this kind of more of this kind of infrastructure. Next is the solar desalination system in one of the islands, the island. This was commissioned in 2017, again a USP project funded by French government, and it was to provide clean and safe drinking water to the locals, as well as it was a master's project for the student. Next, this 45 kilowatt grid connected solar PV at USP, Korean funded project. And this was our first grid connected PV system in 2012. Now 45 kilowatt, and at the moment we have got around 4 megawatt of GCPV. So we can see how much growth there has been in PV in Fiji. For University of Fiji has done a number of capacity building projects with collaboration with many universities and regional organizations. In my concluding remarks, I would say that these projects are the building blocks of making energy system transformations into low carbon systems. And as the Director General of IRENA has tweeted that through long, far-sighted policy measures built around energy transformations and a strong commitment to multilateral collaboration, we can quickly build our economies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ravita. I was particularly interested in the university government partnership programs and projects, because this is exactly the kinds of partnerships we are trying to promote through the universities consortium of small island states. Sometimes we can learn from each other, and even South-South university partnerships are not fully developed, and sometimes we don't have to reinvent the wheel. What might work in Fiji, we may have lessons to learn for applications in St. Vincent, right, and vice versa. So this is really excellent, the direction that we want to go. So I will ask the audience. I see we are falling off with some folks, but I'll ask you to indulge us. We were supposed to end at 11:30, so we're a little bit late, but we would really like to hear from our last speaker on the panel today. So if you can indulge us for a little bit more time, it will be worthwhile. So I want to invite our final speaker, Dr. Catherina Cader. She is with the Renier Lemoine Institute. She's been there since 2012, and she is the deputy head of the Off-Grid Systems Research Unit. Her expertise lies in a lot of things, but largely in utilizing geographic information systems in rural electrification planning. She's done extensive work in Africa, in Nigeria, Ghana, Tanzania, etc. More recently, she's also done a lot of work in the Philippines, the Philippine Islands, on these issues and leveraging GIS for electrification planning. She has degrees in geography, environmental management, and environmental management from universities in Germany, and some I will not try to pronounce, unfortunately. And she has published extensively in the scientific journals. So let me give you over to Dr. Catherina Cader. We can't hear you, Catherina.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Very good.
Okay. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here at this webinar today. Thank you very much, Dr. Shah, for this invitation. I'm also especially pleased to represent my very good colleague, Dr. Philip Blechinger here, since he's our lead expert on island research. But nonetheless, within that presentation, which I'm going to show you, I would like to try to give you an idea how we work in our research institution, also towards bringing in the research on islands. So I think it's going to be hopefully quite interesting to see how we try to integrate a sustainable energy policy with the research we do. So without any further ado, I try to go quite quickly to not spend too much time here. So yeah, just a very brief overview. The Rainer Lemoine Institute is a not-for-profit research institution based in Germany, a woman-led institution with our vision to support the energy transition towards 100% renewable energy. So with this goal, we specifically at the Off-Grid Systems Research Unit, we are supporting the Sustainable Development Goal number 7. And we do this in kind of 3 different research areas. So there's the first one, the decentral supply systems analysis. There we look a lot at energy system modeling, something which we've seen in a previous presentation where we, mini grids are, for example, sized and dimensioned. And we also look at rural electrification planning a little bit broader, not only on the mini grids, but also in the integration of wider electrification plans, where the GIS component is very important, and also the demand modeling of willingness and ability to pay. And more recently, we have that third component where we feel it's becoming more and more important to also consider the climate resilience and the climate change impacts in that overarching research questions on how to achieve the SDGs. Since especially then again on islands, there will be quite strong impacts over the next coming years and decades. And there we try to push knowledge and mitigation strategies which are based on socioeconomic research. We have a large network with international collaborations, for example, with the University of Delaware, but also others in all continents. And we have a strong focus on knowledge transfer, networking activities, but also tool development. I will say a few more words at the end of it. So regarding the decentral supply systems, we are conducting feasibility studies in order to understand what are the best options in order to increase the share of renewable energies in systems which are existing, but also in areas where maybe no secure electricity supply is yet existing. So it's kind of these greenfield and brownfield access, and one of the most used metrics we use is the LCOE calculations in order to also bring in the economic dimension to see which are the systems which are clean but also economically viable at the same time. For the rural electrification planning, we work a lot with renewable resource assessments to really understand which are the resources in the given areas, and also the integration of on and off-grid systems, since we feel it's becoming, or it's still a widely discussed topic, to how far to go into the decentralized dimension, which is happening a lot these days because of the decreasing costs, which we've also heard already in the other presentations. But then there's also that question on where to continue with a more centralized approach. For example, also in the Philippines, we did some studies on submarine cable connections, for example, of different neighboring islands as another option if maybe some islands have very good generation capacities while other may have not so good background conditions. We also, in addition to that, we also implement surveys to really consider the local conditions on the ground to make sure that the solutions we are suggesting are fitting to the local conditions. And then there's the focus on climate resilience, where we feel that the climate change impacts really need to be considered, that we are suggesting resilient energy systems, that also in terms of increasing climate change impacts, the energy systems are resilient, but also that they are of course clean, so that they won't accelerate the climate change further by targeting low or no carbon systems. So we do this on island regions. Actually, it's kind of a historical perspective. So within our research unit, we started with work on islands as kind of a front runner, because islands in itself are very often home to decentralized systems. And now we see that also in other countries which are not islands, decentralized systems play a more important role, and we feel that this is really continuing. So for us, it was kind of a really natural transition to always look at the islands first as kind of a front runner example in that case. So and our core findings also in terms of looking into the cases of islands, we find that the traditional approaches are becoming more and more challenging. We see that very many areas with insufficient energy supply are very remote locations, also locations where we have low densities in terms of population, but also maybe in terms of ability to pay, as we've seen also with some SIDS, for example, in Mauritius or in other SIDS. We also see the case of the challenges in delivery of fossil fuels. So that's another problem which we face due to the remote locations. And also when we do have an on-grid sector existing, we see that often there's a weak quality of supply, but also the business models of the utilities are often not sustainable. So that's also not a good long-term strategy. And on the other hand, we feel that the off-grid options become more and more competitive and attractive. So we see more and more successfully implemented mini-grid developments, also specifically again on islands, but also the decentralized options of solar home systems is something which we are considering in areas where there's little demand for electricity yet, as another decentralized option which should be considered in our analysis. So when we do all these assessments, I would like to spend a few minutes on talking about the frameworks we use. So within our research institute, we have now a very strong focus on using open source tools and also developing those tools jointly with other collaborating institutions. For example, we are one of the co-founders of the Open Modeling Initiative, where we try to use that open source approach in order to make the tools we are developing very much accessible without expensive licensing fees, which might be paid by for other software implementations, which we find is often a barrier also for universities in these areas, that they cannot really use tools because they are not accessible. Also, when we are talking about data collection and making data sets available, we now make them available under open data licenses. So for other interested either researchers, but also the private sectors, this data will be is openly available, which we feel is very important in order to make the research results very transparent and also then more citable, which we also achieve by having a focus on academic publications, so that the findings we get through our applied research in research projects, but also very applied projects and market research projects, are also available to a wider network of interested stakeholders. Yes, so just the very last thing, in the matter of time, I won't jump into it. We just on Tuesday published a new tool, all based on open data, which I can invite you to investigate, where we collected in a huge effort openly available data sets on current status of electricity supply for the case of Nigeria. But I think it's also something which could be then interesting to apply to islands, as for planning of energy systems, the data is always a very crucial element, and having these open platforms available with data can then also help in order to generate knowledge on most viable electrification options, for example. Yes, so with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to invite you to reach out to us for further information. And also, I listed some specific experts on islands here on this last slide. So there's also these local experts on specific regions. Yeah, but also please feel free to reach out to me directly. With that, I hand back over to you, Dr. Shah. I hope I was fast enough. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Catherina. Yes, we appreciate. Yeah, we have time. We have a little bit of time, but thank you so much. And at this point, let me just also mention that the Biden School, and particularly the Energy and Environmental Program here at the Biden School, has recently signed a Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU agreement, with Renier, Lemoine, and we're very happy about that, where the MOU will be covering several of the elements that Dr. Cader just outlined in the very progressive and open data approach that that RLI is pursuing. So we will be engaging, and we're already engaging in some joint research with Dr. Philip Leshinger at RLI and in the Indonesian islands on energy modeling. And we hope to build on this moving forward with our students and faculty and the experts at the Renier Lemoine Institute. I think we have a short recording from Philip. Do we have that here? Chris, can we play that right now? I'll tell.
Catherina had the video?
I don't have it here, but Philip Blechinger, he told me to send all his best regards, and he's excused himself, and he's very excited about the successful collaboration and the MOU signing. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, okay. So what we'll do, we have a video of greetings from Philip and RLI, and the signing of the MOU, and some of the specifics on where we'll be working together. So we will place that on the Island Policy Lab website, and you'll see all the specifics there. Thank you, Catherina. All right. So I thank everyone for holding on and staying with us. As I mentioned in the chat, we have to go by 12, but I encourage everyone in the audience to list your questions in the chat, and what we will do is we will collate and we will coordinate with the panelists to have responses and answers to all of your questions, and we will place all of that on the Island Policy Lab website, and we will continue to be in touch with you and tell you when all of this material, everything here is being recorded. So it will be publicly available and available to you to review at your leisure. I want to thank you. I received the from Chris in our media services department. I received a short list earlier today of everyone who's registered and has been in attendance here. We've had upwards of 50 people, over 60 people outside of University of Delaware registered here. And I just want to thank you, people, from folks from Canada, Mauritius, India, the Netherlands, Maldives, Philippines, the Bahamas, New Zealand, Fiji, Mexico, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, United Kingdom, the Marshall Islands, Myanmar, several places. So we really appreciate you being here, and we will be hosting several more of these, specifically on sustainable energy, but also as the Island Policy Lab and the university's consortium continues, we will be looking at other areas covered under the Samoa Pathway and the SDGs. So on behalf of myself and Chris from Media Services here at UDEL, and our very diligent research assistant here, Pravesh Raghu, who's helped organize a lot of these, I thank you very much. And to all the panelists, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.